Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Hercules and the Space Gods, I'm proud to bring you the UFO entity Enigma. And we have a regular cast of experts here. We have Tim Swartz, we have Setna of Khemet, and we have Carole Gonzalez. Greetings and welcome, oh wonderful panel. How are you today?
Wonderful. Fantastic.
Yep, great to be here, Hercules.
Great to have you here, Tim. And we will start with Tim. Our topic today is astral entities. And basically, one of the problems we have in paranormal explorations is the vocabulary is so valid. Like, for instance, astral means starry. So in antiquity, experiences with UFO entities, what we call them today, were astral encounters. They were encounters that took place with humans and the denizens of the stars. Now, starry and astral, even though they're the same word, in different languages, don't mean the same thing. And astral has come to mean a realm beyond the physical, or that surrounds the physical, where imaginal things happen and dreams take place and creativity runs rampant. So before we develop this program to the next step, I'd like for us to be speaking the same language. And this is the first in a series of episodes that we'll be doing that. And because of his intense scholarship and fame, we're going to start with Tim Swartz.
Oh, well, thank you, Hercules. And happy Father's Day, by the way.
Thank you to you and to all the dads everywhere.
Well, okay, I'll be talking tonight about the whole alien slash extraterrestrial phenomena as associated with astral beings. Now, there's really an extremely rich tradition of communications with extraterrestrials through paranormal, spiritual means, however you would want to describe it. And this has been occurring for centuries, probably thousands of centuries. Long before I think the people started seeing strange craft in the skies and started associating them with extraterrestrial visitors. You had people who were receiving messages, communications, and such from so-called extraterrestrials. Really back before written history, you had the shaman and others who would communicate with the astral beings, the spiritual world, and sometimes these communications involved beings who claim to have come from the stars. Now, at one time, this really wasn't considered any more absurd than communicating with, say, spirits of the ancestors, or with nature spirits who may be occupying nearby areas, and you would talk with them and ask for favors in return for favors. Excuse me, Hercules. I'm gonna wipe my glasses off here so I can see a little better. That's better. had a smudge like right in my center of vision. But every once in a while, the communication would shift to creatures that claim to have come from the stars, and this really. And I'll say this again: long before we were seeing UFOs, the extraterrestrials were coming up with different ways to try to talk with us, and you look at some of the old, say, channeled messages, especially starting Well, I mean, you could go as far back, and let me make sure I have my notes right about this, Hercules. You know, you could go back, and I've talked about him before with Emanuel Swedenborg,
Apps.
who is a Swedish philosopher and scientist. Now, he started his career as an engineer and was a publisher of Sweden's first scientific journal. And I'll attempt to pronounce it here. I think it's like Daedalus Hyperboreus. Now, Swedenborg devoted himself to geometry, chemistry, and metallurgy, as well as studies of anatomy and physiology. Now, you have to remember that Swedenborg, he was born in 1688 and passed away in 1772. So, I mean, you know, he was really on the forefront of scientific theory. But in the 1730s, Swedenborg became increasingly interested in spiritual matters and was determined to find a theory which would explain how matter relates to spirit. So in 1744, at the age of 56, Swedenborg began to have a series of strange dreams and visions. And he found some of these visions to be, pretty disturbing, and it made him question his faith in Christianity. But after a while, he was able to come to terms with this. Later, he would write a book called Life on Other Planets. Now, in this book, Swedenborg states that he was visited by spirits of beings who lived on other planets in our solar system. And you have to remember, this was in the middle 1700s. And he wrote that all the life forms he visited in this solar system and those that talked with him were humanoid in appearance, but they were not carbon-based physical life forms like us. Though he did say that they had social structure and family structures, and we're all well aware of the reality that there was only one God, keeping with his already established beliefs in Christianity. Now, Swedenborg says that every planet and every moon has a spiritual life form on it. And the reason for this, he said, is that the universe is the seminary of heaven. Every planet and moon is a place of learning and growth for the entire spiritual community at large. And he says that some of these other interplanetary life forms are more advanced than us and are interested in us and in trying to help us develop our own higher spiritual philosophy. Now, Swedenborg cautioned that he could not see the actual planet to determine if it was inhabited or not, that he was only aware of spirits that were associated with that planet. All right. So as we go on into the 19th century with the development of spiritualism, you had an onslaught, really, of channeled communications, not only from beings who said that they were spirits of your passed on loved ones. You know, great Granny Jones is trying to talk to you from the other plane.
You froze, Tim.
Oh dear.
Tim, I don't know if you could hear us or not, but you froze. Your screen is frozen.
Sorry,
It's
Hercules.
moving now.
Yep, sorry, Hercules. Yeah, it looks like the spirits are trying to communicate through my internet there. But where I left off was that the spirits were trying to communicate through the spiritualism movement of the starting in the 19th century, some of these communications also involved extraterrestrials. There was a whole movement, especially starting in New York, the state of New York, and then up the East Coast, where a lot of the higher society, let's put it that way, was communicating with a series of claimed to be extraterrestrials that were talking about new technological advancements that were coming from not only from the world of spirit, but from the extraterrestrials who were hoping to lead the way to a new scientific era on the planet. And some of these socialites actually brought this information to a guy named Nikola Tesla and said that the extraterrestrials had given them basically blueprints on how to build a ship that would take them off the planet and into the stars. Now, Tesla, despite what people may have heard, really at that time was not interested in psychic phenomena. He was a fairly practical man, so he kind of he didn't kind of he did he dismissed all of this, but it's interesting because a lot of other books have said that Tesla was a part of this group and this movement to advance science through the use of channeled communications, especially from the extraterrestrials. But nothing really, unfortunately, ever came of that. And I've actually have spent a lot of research time trying to locate some of these channeled papers that supposedly had diagrams and blueprints and instructions on how to build these spaceships. And so far, I have not been successful in finding anything. There is stuff on the internet, but it's spurious. And I would not, I would not believe in any of it. Now,
He's supposed to have been a Venusian as well, according to some people.
Oh yeah,
Aries, he's an archangel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there. I can't think of there was an author that Tim Beckley actually published some of her stuff that that was her hypothesis that Tesla was a Venusian set to planet Earth. But I think that does humanity a disservice, thinking that we're not capable of producing somebody as intelligent as Nikola Tesla. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that that our species has the potential for greatness with people like Tesla and Leonardo da Vinci and others. But I think there is this conceit with a lot of people that that we're just not smart enough, and nor will we ever be smart enough to be able to do the great things that some of these so-called astral beings are trying to instruct us, and that it requires a walk-in entity, so to speak, that come from other worlds and take over a human body in order to help us evolve, not only spiritually but with technology. But I think Tesla is a good example of just the great things that our species is capable of. Uh, Now, you also have lots and lots of channeled communications by the use of automatic writing, Ouija boards, believe it or not, which I never encourage people to play around with Ouija boards. But I have a pretty good collection of stories of people who communicated allegedly with extraterrestrial beings. Through Ouija boards. There was one story that took place in 1964, and this involved a man by the name of Peter S. And this story came to me from author Stephen Wagner, who knew of my interest in this stuff and sent it in my direction. And I guess that along with his aunt and uncle, they were playing with the Ouija board when a spirit who called himself Ethan, Ithan, came onto the board and claimed to be from the planet Venus. Now, this entity communicated for a while, made several types of predictions, and then disappeared. So about 5 months later, this guy's brother-in-law, who lived in Calcutta and came by for a visit, and had just happened to mention that him and his family, a few months previously, had been playing with the Ouija board again, with no prior communication. And he said that a Venusian named Ethan had came up, made the same kind of predictions to them, and then vanished. Now, later, when Peter and his family had moved to Australia, they were watching a television show called A Current Affair. I think that may still be on somewhere. And the announcer interviewed a Sydney clairvoyant who claimed to be in regular psychic contact with a being from Venus whose name was Ethanus. Ithanus, basically the same name except with the US on the end. So that's it's one of these stories that kind of like synchronous events, coincidence. Sometimes they're interesting, but what was the meaning of that? Was there a flying saucer overhead that the extraterrestrials inside were having fun and messing around with people here on planet Earth? I don't know. But if you look at there was a book written by, let me look at this real quick here through my notes here, Hercules. Okay, this comes from Jennifer Portera and an article that she wrote called Spiritualist Aliens and UFOs, Extraterrestrials as Spirit Guides. Now, Portera says that extraterrestrials have come to represent for many spiritualists the successful achievement of the ultimate spiritualist goal, the union between spirituality and science. Extraterrestrials are seen as spiritually superior to us because their science exceeds our own. Their science is perceived superior because it incorporates recognition of spiritual truth. So consequently, within the North American spiritualist context, the adoption of extraterrestrialist spirit guides can be seen both as a rationalization of spiritualist beliefs through a strong idolization of science and as a critique of orthodox science for ignoring the spiritual realm. So for several of the spiritualists, and this is quoted from the author, for several of the spiritualists with whom I worked, extraterrestrials have consequently become excellent choices for spirit guides. Now, I just find that really interesting, considering...
We need to wrap up, but I will cede all my time to you. So hopefully we'll have time for me to listen to the rest of your presentation because it touches upon a lot of things that I've experienced. I will share one before we move on to Setna.
Please do.
Mark Brinkerhoff was learning his craft around the same time that I was, and within 10 block area where I was. And what interests me about Mark is not that I believe everything his spirits tell him, because I don't, but I was being told very similar or the same things back in the day. So this made me question the phenomenon, which again, I'm still an experiencer and I've studied it my entire life. And I began to wonder whether local spirits run the same game with different people, and they're behind a lot of the circles, because the same types of things are being told, especially in regards to the relationship with elementals and things like that. The vocabulary is there. So I was told the same things. When I first started experiencing the outer space brothers, I started questioning the phenomenon a bit more, and because it was too science fiction-y, and I recognized some of the names from science fiction. Like the Venusian that I met was named Sarek, which was the name of Spock's father in Star Trek. So again, I don't know what the reality is behind what the spirits are saying, but I do know that the phenomenon itself is real. And so I'm very curious again about what Mark thinks. I don't believe that Sanandus wants us to thank him or worship him or things like that. I have a really tough time. I'm Greek. The gods are like us. So, although I respect and honor the Olympians, there's nothing slavish about my relationship with the Olympians or for many people. So it's that aspect that you need to say thank you all the time that's always bothered me in conventional religion. But again, he's communicating what he believes and what he's being told, and I respect that, and I'm grateful that he's doing that, because through his conversations, like with all of you, we get to shed different lights on the phenomenon. But thank you so much. You touched upon so many important things. I'm really appreciative.
Thank you, Hercules, and I appreciate that what you added to the end of this conversation. That was really helpful.
And now we move on to Setna of Khemet, our sorcerer. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for that. I have a personal, like you, I do a lot of channeling. And even Carole will tell you, a long time ago, I encountered a being whose name is Sorensiti. He says, from the area around the star Sirius, and from what he calls a celestial library. He often will credit the goddess Isis as his mistress, and that she tells him what he needs to know. I've been working with this spirit since 1977, and I've been working with a fellow named Dr. Ted Bennett, who was associated with various assorted metaphysical companies and things. And I was tested. They put weird things like brainwave charts and things to check out what was going on in my head, if it was actually me acting or something. So when I do these channeling sessions, they found that there is another consciousness that takes me over. And it's not possession, as like of exorcist fame. It's actually a spiritual entity. He doesn't pretend to be a god. If anything, he says he's a librarian. And I'm working with him for a long, long time with past lives and certain future events. He knew about the World Trade Centers. We were working in a session, I don't know, in 1999. And he had me touching the World Trade Centers, and he said, these will not be around much longer. And I have people that will confirm that. He mentioned other things too. He was not happy with events coming up in the future, the near future. So this was kind of something I learned. But this goes back also, I'll bring it back to Olympian things. You have, for centuries in Delphi, the great oracle, the Pythia, who were many, many Pythia. Even Alexander the Great went there, and also in the temple of Amun in Luxor, we had a great prophet and prophetess who would speak as the god Amun, who again also said he came from a different planet and star system. So this has been going on for thousands of years. We had spiritual movements and things. My grandmother, Lillian Barth, and her 7 sisters were the Barth sisters. And in the 1920s, as Brian was saying, Tim was saying, there was all the rage with spiritualists. My grandmother and her sisters did table tilting. They claimed to be, his name was Kaio, was a spirit that one of my aunt Charlotte, was able to contact, and Hayo or Shayo would tell her different things. And he was supposed to be from outside of near Jupiter. He said that there was a small planet or asteroid that would come every couple of 25 or 26 years that would come between the Earth and, he said, the far colder planets. So that was an interesting thing. But to my own personal experience is with Soren Siti. I worked with him for many, many years. Only recently I've gone back to it because there seemed to be a need for past lives, for more interesting future events. People are working with me with mediumship with this also. And he seems to be much more helpful for me now than he was when I was younger. What do you think about that, Hercules?
I think it's interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to going forward with this. My sister is what they would call a Pythia. It's very fun, very short, quick little story. My friend Daniel's mother was going to have her 6th child. The doctors advised her against it because she was 48 and a half. And she developed, there's a kind of a diabetes that women that are pregnant have sometimes. And they also told her she had a threat of leukemia. And she didn't listen. And they were going to take the child early, a cesarean section, several weeks before she thought it would be born. She asked whether the child was a male or a female. She'd had 5 sons, 6 sons, 4 sons and a daughter, Lisa. And my sister said, because they all told her it would be a girl and a Taurus. And my sister shook her head and said, no. Her guides, and she claimed Apollo as her guide, told her that it would be a boy and a Gemini. And sure enough, when it was born, well, weeks before they knew later, that it was a boy and a Gemini, not a girl and a Taurus. So my sister is also very psychic this way. She doesn't use these energies like my mother. She says, oh, that's a lot of faldera, a lot of nonsense, because she dismisses her own abilities, which I find kind of sad, because she's very powerful, and she doesn't want anything to do with it. She says it's something that, annoys her more than anything else.
That's fascinating. I find that the spirits often have predictive abilities. I've shared this on the show before, so I'll share it again. My band of spirits back in the day when I was doing mediumship told me that someone of vital importance to my life had wandered into my life. And I couldn't think of anybody who would fit that definition. So I questioned it, and they said, no, you'll see that someone has entered your life. And I didn't for very many years. And then when I hooked up with Athena, Athena turns out used to write for a fanzine that I used to publish. And she had entered my life around that time when the spirits told me that. So although it took decades to happen, it did happen just like they said. And then Athena and I discovered that we crossed paths many times before then, even into childhood, and weren't aware of each other, even though we were in the same space. We used to go to the same Rickles and look for the same types of books.
Oh God, Rickles.
It was pretty amazing.
We have the same connection, Hercules. We both I grew up on Long Island. I'm from Brooklyn. I lived for a long time in Manhattan in the West Village, and then on the Upper East Side after a while, and then went back to Long Island. But we crossed paths at Magical Child, I'm told,
that too.
many, many times. Sure. Herman always was putting on
from home, the Magical Child, and the Warlock shop before it.
I knew it when it was the Warlock Shop. I knew it when there's before that, when it was a catalog that Herman had just put out. And it was a terrible newspaper print catalog that he had for many years. I had lectured at the Magical Child, mostly about Tutankhamun and the 18th and 19th dynasty gods and goddesses. So, but this was kind of an interesting thing that, you know, I knew about you before we can't crashed into each other, as it were. I kind of knew you were there.
Also recognition beyond the fact, you know, because I meet a lot of interesting people, but it clicked with you that I knew you from someplace. I didn't know if it was on the astral plane. I didn't know if it was in a past life or in this one. But the more we talked, the more I too came to the conclusion that it had to be a Magical Child, because that was one of my
I'm sure. Although I also did many, many psychic fairs. The Eyes of Learning, I lectured there. I was also at Programs for Human Development in Connecticut, and many, many other. I was with a company called Cosmic Contact, run by a guy named Michael Goodrich, yes, of the tire fame. And we were all over restaurants and things, and we had many conventions also where I'd spoken also. So any one of those places is where we probably met.
Well, we're working together now, and that's the important thing. And I'm
Here
grateful.
we are, two Oz, Hercules, two Oz.
Thank you so very much, Setna. You're awesome. And again, I'm glad we're on this adventure together. And we have now to focus on Carole. Carole, what can you tell us about astral beings?
Listening to all this, I do have many comments. I don't know where to start, but I will start somewhere. I'll say I personally prefer to separate the world of spirit from the world of space aliens or encounters. You would say that's my preference. It's too much. There is an overlap, but it's too much to take in at one time and at the same time. But I know how you started off this meeting with talking about the definition of the word astral and how it's been used. So I grew up with the 19th century concept of astral, with all the people and teachers that I had. I hate to say, well, I shouldn't say it's probably concurrent with the Magical Child, but before the Warlock Shop, there were other shops here in Manhattan that I knew about. I worked with Ethel Myers, the medium, if you recall who she is.
Yes.
I worked with her later on. She had a lot of interesting stories, and I have a lot of experiences when I worked with her. It was a short period, though. Carole also had a spirit guide called Iwas, who some seem to think is like a gray. His sketches make him look like a gray. But that said, I want to concentrate more on experience. And I would start first because I grew up with many, many experiences, and my main source of study, my course of study before I had any kind of guide or teacher, were dreams. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian church, and I had experiences, but there was no one who really knew how to guide children, because I was a child at the time, a child who may be having unusual experiences. So I remember a question I was put either by me or another child. Why aren't there miracles today, like the miracles that we see in the Bible? Well, there are. And the best way to work with them at the time, I was told, was through dreams, because the Bible is full of dreams. I was always looking for something along those lines. And when I left the fundamentalist church, I did a meditation that was about guiding me to the right source, to guides, to different ways of thinking. So the first jump I made was to the Lutheran Church, not a big jump in your mind, but for me it was a big jump, and then to the Episcopal Church. I discovered the Weiser's bookstore, which I'm sure all of you have heard of and they know.
Oh, well.
And some little journals I came across. journals written by, let's say, you, me, nobody famous, but they were the journals were about people's personal spiritual experiments. And I came across one that was about a man who worked with the astral. He talked about how he would put himself into the state of mind and that he uh, would do this meditation and he described the different stages of the meditation until he got into, he left his body. He described all these little states. He left his body and he moved into this other realm of being. He even had maps of this other realm. I'll ask a question. Right now I'm seeing a speaker, Setna. Is that, are you getting me or?
I see you well, yes.
Okay, it must be my setting. I just want to make sure I'm getting across. So I decided to do the same meditation as was described in this book. And lo and behold, at the same time, I did a fast. It was an Edgar Cayce style fast that was supposed to be for purification. I did the fast, and I came to a consciousness where I actually left my body. As I speak, as we sit here, I actually left my body and walked around my room. I didn't want to go anywhere else, actually. I was a bit afraid. What did I let myself in for? So I pulled myself back into my body. It happened spontaneous another time. And I just I knew to focus on a point that brought me back into my body. And I was fine. At that time, I lived with my mother. And I recall I got up. I felt something strange that I felt I had to drink some juice or something for energy. That was the last day of my fast. And I literally fell out of my body. And my mother helped me up. I could feel her. I was still in my body. I could feel her moving me, but I wasn't moving. She was dragging me actually, but I felt like I was moving with it. I just felt I have to stay in the body. That was my big experiment. Another time I had something come through me through meditation and it left a message through automatic writing, I guess it was. And it said, challenge, challenge, challenge. Rather than being afraid, I thought I would take that as a challenge for learning, a challenge to move ahead in that realm. I also wanted to add, I don't want to leave this out. Malachi Martin, who was, you may know him as a priest. He wasn't really an exorcist, I understand. He assisted in exorcisms, but he was a priest who was very familiar with this type of work. And he said that demons, as that was what he worked with, worked on a specific field. And I think he was describing the astral field. So you found all sorts of beings, angels, demons, whatever, in that realm. That little book that I read, that journal of this particular man's personal journey, described some of the things that he went through. There was a layer of what he felt were like body parts. It wasn't really, or pieces of things. It was a lower level vibration. Then you could raise yourself to a higher level where there were other things, etc., and so forth. So I'd mention that because that's something I worked on through dreams. I may still have that journal. I have other journals of other occultists working on a small scale who write their experiences, all learning experiences and all very positive things. So I think I bring that up in this talk. Do you have anything anyone wants to say about it?
I actually do. I remember, Carole, back in 1992, you had a vision and you were told when you spoke to me to walk in silhouette, to work. Do you remember that? To move in silhouette. In a dream, you were told. The Egyptian gods came to you and they said, move in silhouette. And I never forgot that. It was an interesting thing. You were seeing all the movements and the energies working in the way the paintings and the statues and the reliefs were done in the movements of silhouette. And it was an interesting thing. He said first it was dark and then there was lightness.
I'm going to think about that. I don't recall it exactly like that, but I did have some dreams that were related to Isis, the goddess Isis, which is
Yes.
probably why I moved into the Fellowship of Isis. That I do remember, but I'm always careful, considering some of the experiences I've had. I don't really talk to entities. I don't want to talk to entities. I sense them. I experience things. I think it works much better that way. And since I've been doing some studies lately about spiritual experience as presented by exorcists, there's lots of them online discussing Catholic theology and other ways of looking at the spirit, the invisible realm. I think that I would rather be careful about where I go, because I remember that experience in the astral, and you can go. I could have gone out, I guess, visiting some of you people. That was conscious. I think we also move astrally unconscious through our dreams. That's not as frightening as actually projecting yourself into that realm. There's also certain magical rituals that have you do that kind of thing. I recall reading, again, I haven't done any detailed magical rituals of that sort, but I like reading about everything. My magical work is basically dream based, and I do burn candles. I don't think that's very radical or very controversial. Especially since I've discovered the magic of the Roman Catholic Church. They probably hate me saying this, but they burn candles. They accept the basic precepts, principles of the Bible. So there you go.
Thank you very much. Tim, do you have anything to ask Setna or Carole?
Yes, I do. Setna, I find your story talking about, I think you said it was your grandmother and her sisters
Yes.
who were spiritualist mediums.
They were called the Barth sisters, Barth, Barth.
And where did they live? Where did they operate from?
They came originally from Brooklyn, and then they were working in little cafes and things down in the West Village for many in the 1920s.
1920s, right? Okay, all right. Well, I just find the story about their communications with an alleged extraterrestrial from a planet near Jupiter, because that's just, I mean, I've got just like all kinds of caseloads of very similar types of stories, and I mean, and I should add that it's debatable, as Carole said, whether or not these astral beings who are doing these communications are trustworthy. Whether or not that they are, extraterrestrials or spiritual beings or what have you, but they can sure spin a good yarn, can't they?
Well, these aunts of my grand aunts were very table tilting, Ouija board, all that kind of thing, all those things that were in vogue in that time. And that's how they were kind of, I don't know if I believed half of the things my grandmother and her sisters were telling me, but it was very interesting. They were, I mean, I half got the thing with the trumpets and the ghost things and all that stuff. But it was interesting because they were pretty well known because there were 7 of them. And my grand aunt Gertrude was the 7th daughter of a 7th daughter. So they said she was the one that went into the trances and things.
Well, it is just interesting about, how the, so-called extraterrestrials were communicating with people even before the modern UFO era. And you can still see, in modern times, the same kind of messages that were being put out, back in the 19th and early 20th century with the contactees, and now with some of the abductees, or those who are, what are they called? Not encounterers. I can't think of the word right now, but I'll say.
Experiencers.
I'm sorry.
Experiencers.
Experiencers. Thank you.
Experiencers.
Yes, thank you, Carol. But yeah, I mean, you see the same kind of messages, coming through. It's like John Keel put, it's like this giant record player in the sky that is stuck and just keeps skipping, over the same message over and over and over again throughout the years.
Disneyland of the gods. Yes, I've noticed that too, that these messages, some of them from antiquity, like for instance, there's something called ancient science fiction that has people traveling to other planets and meeting beings that are mostly mythical or sometimes different, and they too are told what the interaction with the people on other planets is with the Earth. And so all of that is very, very old. We've talked about the ancient aliens, especially when they describe Greeks, Egyptians, and other ancient people, and you put that template on top of the experience, and that explanation accounts for a lot. But again, I've always thought that these are stories, and as people, we tend to live in stories, whether it's a Roman Catholic story or a pagan Egyptian story, or whatever. We place ourselves in these stories, and they color how we live our lives. And some of the phenomenon we're describing and we're experiencing are very old indeed. And you could weave them into any story you happen to believe in or that you're telling at the time.
Oh yeah, very much so. Go ahead,
I'm
Carol.
sorry,
I'm sorry.
just wanted to add one thing, since you were talking about the different kinds of spirits that were common in different eras. I recall with in the time of Ethel Myers that all these mediums, I also met Sybil Leek, that was another one. They all had Native American guides.
Yes.
I'm guessing that Native Americans knew the landscape of the astral world a lot better than most. They were guides.
I had Atlanteans, I had an ancient Egyptian, I had people from Venus, I had all sorts. It was quite a menagerie of people as spirit guides. They were distinctly different, and they existed beyond my imagination, which was interesting because other people had encounters with them, and that led them to me, or they were able to communicate with me what they were told. It sounded very similar to what I was being told. So again, the phenomenon is real. I don't believe it's represented itself honestly or clearly, but I'm convinced that the phenomenon itself, whatever it happens to be ultimately and eventually, is real. And sometimes words don't mean the same thing. Like for instance, the word noble and gentle. We have an idea of what those things mean to us. They're very high-minded principles. People are noble, people are gentle, but they come from the words nobility and gentry, neither of which was considered very noble or gentle in the sense that we consider those words to be. And they would kill you for nothing if you're trespassing on their land, or if you're killing one of the deer that's their province to eat, or if they conquered you. They wouldn't be very noble and gentle by our definition. And the same thing with angels and demons. The word demon comes from daemon, which could mean your higher self. Socrates, the spirit that spoke with him, it was called his daemon in antiquity. And they were considered to be in between spirits, in between the earth and the heavens, or in between the earth and the underworld. And just because you're an underworld demon didn't mean that you were bad. And you could be a heavenly demon and you could be good. Those were qualified by agathos daemon, which meant a good daemon or an innocent daemon, and kakodemon, which meant a bad demon. And the word angel just meant messenger. If you gave Setna a message from Herman Slater, you're an angel by Greek definition. And angels could be intermediary spirits, but they weren't necessarily intermediary spirits. archons, which a lot of people are making a very big deal about now, as evil computerized robots that control our reality. Archon just means leader. It was a position of leadership in Athenian government. But certain spirits were considered leader spirits, or Elohim. That's the same thing. Elohim means lords. And lord, even in our language, could mean a supernatural being. It could mean a boss. It could mean a boss of a household. We have the words meaning. So when looking at ancient material, or even material that's not ancient, it really is important to get a sense of what the vocabulary is actually talking about, because it's very misleading otherwise.
Hercules, I think you made a good point previously when you were talking about the various messages that have been received over the centuries by the astral beings, and it just got me thinking whether or not these messages, because a lot of people naturally, because of the way that they're being received, either through channeling or sometimes, with face-to-face communications, with strange beings, people are wanting to take these messages literally. And I'm wondering if, like you said, they should be treated more like parables. Not to be taken literally, but more to teach an idea, to people. And I think that's maybe one of the mistakes that a lot of people have when they receive these types of communications, is that they're saying, this is real, this is absolutely real, what they are saying, when instead it should be taken more as, metaphor or parable, like I said.
Yeah, that is true to a great extent, but sometimes they're oddly specific in a weird way. Like one of the things the spirits told me back when I was a kid was one day I would be known as Thor in the human services, and I would help many people. And that seems scary. Like, so what the hell does that mean? And I didn't know for very many years, until I had the show Thor the Barbarian on Fringe Cable in New York, and I was working in the human services at the time. So people in the human services knew me as Thor, and I actually did a lot of programming for people who had different problems with being on psychotropics, being on alcoholism or drug, and having problems with that. So I was Thor in the human services. I was on TV. Everybody knew, despite being an eccentric barbarian, I was also a healer in the mental health field. So that just happened, and it wasn't any big deal. It was odd, but it wasn't a big deal. But I was told that years before I decided what I wanted to do with my life. And when I decided what I wanted to do, at that point, it had nothing to do with what I was told. I didn't deliberately set out to be Thor in the human services and to help lots of people and to be known. After a while, it became something funny, and people were saying, we can't believe we're going to meetings on human services, and the meetings are being led by a barbarian with a sword, because they but again, that was years before I knew what that meant. And although I will agree that many of the things I was told were symbolic, some of the things, like being told that my wife had entered my life years before she became my wife, or years before I was even aware of her anything other than a writer for my magazine. Yeah, so you get those oddly specific things. I remember once the spirits told this woman that her husband was going to die in 3 years, and instead of generating more conflict, just let him transition in 3 years, then she'd have her freedom. And 3 years later, he died. And I'd forgotten about that, because a lot of times when you're in trance, you're not there. You can go off and have astral adventures and gallivant. So she was shaken by that, and I could imagine, I'd be shaken if that happened to me. So again, there is something symbolic, there is something personal and private about the messages, but sometimes there isn't. And then you begin to question, how much beyond space and time are these entities? How could they be so oddly specific about something that I have no idea about? And on
Oh,
that,
yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
on that note, we're wrapping up. But Tim, we'll start with you. How can people contact you, and what did you want to add to the last few sentences?
Oh, sure. Well, thank you again for having me on tonight's panel. It's as always, it's absolutely fascinating, and of course, I'll take the time to plug our new book, which is Weird Time: Exploring the Mysteries of Time and Space. And both Hercules and Michael have chapters in this book. And so, if anybody is interested in learning more about it, and there's also links to Amazon where you can get both print or ebooks, you can check out the website, which is weirdtimebook.com.
Thank you very much. We will put a link tomorrow to the site so people can check out the book for themselves. And I'm looking forward to having an episode just devoted to the book.
Yes, that would be great.
And next we go to Carole, the lovely Carole, who we're privileged to have on today. How can people contact you? And do you have any last thoughts?
Look, anyone can message me and tell me why you want to contact me if you have no one in common with me. I'm on Facebook, Carole Gonzalez. They're welcome to friend me and chat with me.
Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, Setna of Khemet.
Okay, there's a bunch of ways you can reach me. The newest one is TikTok. You can get me at Comwest, KHAEMUAST_Uchat. You can get me at Michael K. Waterman on Facebook. You can get me on Facebook also at Phono Wizard. You can also reach me by phone, 516-650-3691. Or if you'd rather email me at mkwaterman@icloud.com.
Thank you very much, Setna. I have one quick story to share, and I might have shared it with you guys before. But when I was very young, but I was doing the deep trance mediumship, lights used to go out, and it wasn't because they had automatic sensors that would shut off when there were no cars passing. This was way back when, 50 years ago, 50 years ago. But the lights used to go out if I was walking down the street in sequence, or sometimes every other light would go out or something. So for years, I did not know what that meant, and I asked repeatedly to the spirits, what are you trying to communicate? I'm not getting it. Maybe I'm stupid, but I don't understand what you're trying to communicate. No answer. They continued going out. So one day I was really angry at it, and I said, look, I can't fucking understand what you're trying to communicate, other than the fact that you're there, which I acknowledge that something's there turning off lights. I don't know what you're saying, so please stop. And it did. It stopped. After that, it never happened to me again until they started putting those street sensors on where it would happen to anybody who wasn't a car who was going down the street. So again, I don't know what that was all about, but it happened that way. So thank you, everybody. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be talking with you. I look forward to our next conversation, be it on or off the air. And again, happy Father's Day to all the dads in your life, past, present, and future.
Thanks, Hercules.
Hey, good night.
Blessings, Hercules, and good night.
Blessings and good night. This will be up tomorrow. And let me find the button now. Here we go.